weird to have animosity towards an entire month, because I feel like February went out of its way to personally offend me and sabotage my reading. Just like sucked all of the joy out of my face. I really should learn not to taunt abstract concepts like months. Look what happened when I said come at me 2020. And welcome to my February wrap up, aka the month I would most like to forget now, please. Thank you, ta. I got really upset with people at the start of 2021 who were like, this year's already crap, I want a refund. I was like, give the year a chance. It's only 2 months in. I know that the worldwide pepperoni is not great right now, but we're trying. And then February happened. And now I would also like a refund and to speak to a manager. I call these wrap-ups my tops and bottoms on the premise that there will also be tops to go with the bottoms. Instead, what I've got is the bottoms, the worstestest bottoms and the worsterer bottoms, and the scum floating on the top. Okay, that's kind of a lie. There was one shining glory, then there was just all the other stuff. Let's talk about it, shall we? Let's have our mutual therapy session and then I can just move on. We're going to start not with one bottom, not with 2 bottoms, but with 3 bottoms. The bottomiest of all of the bottoms. In February, myself and I was gonna say the lovely Emma or the wonderful Emma or just she's just the adequate Emma now. Just the alright, the semi alright, sometimes okay friend Emma. We did the Find It and Read It challenge, otherwise known as the Big Fat Fail. I will leave the scavenger hunt portion of it, otherwise known as the fun part, down in the description if you'd like to go and see how the chaos started. But essentially we had to read a book that the other person had read and loved, and so in that case I ended up with A Simple Favour by Darcey Bell, a book from our own TBRs which the other person had to read, and so I picked from my TBR for both of us The Furies by Katie Lowe, and then a book from the other person's TBR that they had picked for us to buddy read, and Emma picked The Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin. I know so many regrets were had. I had previously DNF'd A Simple Favour, and this was Emma's revenge because I accidentally made her read a book that she had also DNF'd. The short story about this one is that it's trying to be funny and it's trying to be quirky, and both times I hated it. None of the choices that any of the characters made sense, and the entire time I was reading it I was just like, why? This book is responsible, however, for my new resolution for 2021 and beyond, which is that if I have DNF'd a book previously, I am not picking it up for anybody. So, no. Next up was The Furies by Katie Lowe, which promised dark academia and witchcraft, and which instead inspired the voicemail, and which I said to Emma that I wanted every one of these characters to all climb into a very small car and then to drive off a very steep cliff. I hated everybody, which was fine because they all hated each other too. Everybody was shallow and pointless, and the writing was pretentious and flowery. Also, it's supposedly set in 1997 and I got no 90s from this. 0 90s, diddly squat 90s, and I was personally offended by that. And then next up, The Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin did a few of the things that I hate a lot about literary fiction. Firstly, it did none of what it said it was going to do in the premise, which is just I'm starting to wonder whether the people who write synopses for literary fiction are either sadists and they think it's really fun to give us a premise that we're never gonna get, or whether they're just handed a bunch of really boring books and they're doing their very best to make them sound interesting. Secondly, this one committed the sin of having just boring characters. And not characters who just made really stupid, unbelievable choices like in A Simple Favour, but characters who I literally could not care less about. And lastly, and genuinely most offensively, with all joking aside, this one also perpetuated the trope of the sad gay love story. The gay character in this lives in San Francisco in the middle of the AIDS epidemic, so we all could guess at the very start exactly what was going to happen. And not only does that inevitable end happen, but we spend a lot of time working up to it, with repeatedly terrible encounters wherein all the joy is sapped out of being queer. And I I'm so very over it. So all of these books have ended up on the trash unhaul pile, and I'm not going to be sad to see any of them leave. Emma and I have decided that for round 2 of this challenge in the summer, we're going to be better book pickers. Get thee behind me, Satan. And breathe. Let us talk now about a genuinely joyful book. A book that floated to the top of all of this mess and made me smile all over my face. And made me pause reading and read several parts of it aloud to several people. There are quite a few large sections of Starfell and various different WhatsApp messages in my phone. Almost nobody escaped. Well done if you were one of those people. I mentioned that I was reading Starfell in my January TBR, and when I checked that video I said at the time, oh, I'm a third of the way through it and I want to finish it this month. But you know, life happened. It was one of those things, and it wasn't until February that I actually got a chance to pick it up and finish it. And when I did, I absolutely flew through it and I kicked myself the entire way for sleeping on it. So the premise of this one is that Willow Moss is a young witch. She is in fact the youngest witch in a family of sisters, all of whom are significantly more powerful than she is. In this world, witches don't have an entire spell book and loads of different things that they can do. They have one talent that is given to them when they're born. Unfortunately for Willow, her talent is not really thought to be a very useful one. Willow can find missing things, which is great, you know, when you've lost a thing, but when you haven't, there's kind of just nothing you can do with it. One day, Willow is home alone and kind of feeling like an old discarded boot that's missing a pair, and in walks an extremely strange person who turns out to be one of the most powerful witches in the world. And she tells Willow that last Tuesday, as in the calendar day of the week, Tuesday, is missing. Nobody can remember what they did. It has gone. And if Willow can't help her find it, then the entire fabric of the world is going to unravel. First of all, can we just say how awesome that premise is? I think you have a level of suspension of disbelief in children's books that you wouldn't necessarily have for any other types of fantasy books, and so they just get to do things that blow your mind in a like casual throwaway way, like, oh yeah, last Tuesday's missing, we need to find it. But what really did it for me in this book was the characters. I really loved Willow. She was the sweetest, most determined kid. She reminded me a lot of Tiffany Aching from Terry Pratchett's Discworld, where she's just determined and headstrong, but quite practical. She knows these things need to be done even though she doesn't really want to do them, and so she's kind of stomping her way through life like, fine, I'll do it. But the thing about Willow is that she kind of has this level of wonder because she's very much been left out of all of the magical goings on in her world because her talent really isn't one that anybody values. She hasn't had some of the experiences that her sisters have had. So when Morag takes her on this adventure and she ends up tramping about the countryside and going to all of these weird and wonderful places, she's just kind of constantly like, oh, so that's the thing. I also absolutely loved Morag Vane, who is the most powerful witch who has come to take Willow on this quest. She was great. She kind of eschews that weird thing that some middle grade fantasy does where when there's an adult present, they don't really properly look after the child. Whereas Morag is like, no, I'm going to take you on this adventure and I'm going to look after you, but I'm also going to teach you how to look after you. But I would be remiss in not mentioning one of my very favourite things, which is the magical cat that lives underneath Willow's bed. He's annoyed with life, he's scared of everything, and he absolutely does not want to go on any adventures. Thank you very much. But he gets stuffed in Willow's carpet bag anyway, and he gets them into some situations with his little sarcastic remarks that nobody's really meant to hear, and he just makes me so happy. I actually started this one just before January, and within the first 20 pages I already knew that I was going to absolutely love it, and so the second one is actually sitting waiting for me on my shelves, and you can bet that I am going to be reading that very soon. Next up is another tragedy of February, and it is a bottom that I am really salty about. This is Therapy by Sebastien Fitzek. I have had this on my shelves for such a long time. The premise of this one is that Victor is a psychiatrist and he has taken himself to a tiny little island in the North Sea where he has withdrawn from everybody else pretty much in the entire world because his daughter has gone missing and he has been unable to process the fact that he has lost her. Josie was 12 when she went missing and she was suffering from, as it tells you at the start, a very strange and incurable illness, and the circumstances are all a little bit suspicious. And that's the setup for it anyway. And then randomly a beautiful woman turns up. A beautiful woman. She just rocks up at his front door at his tiny little cottage in the North Sea and she introduces herself as somebody who needs his help. Anna is a novelist and she has a strange form of schizophrenia whereby all of her characters that she writes about become real to her. But in her last novel she wrote about a little girl with a strange and incurable illness, and the little girl's circumstances are very, very, very similar to Josie's, and so Victor decides that he has to take on this case, that he has to give Anna therapy so that she can tell him all about this little girl who he thinks is his little girl. I don't even know where to start with the things that are wrong with this book. For a start, the premise of it is just completely unbelievable. It is held together with glue and hope. The idea of a prominent psychiatrist who is very, very, very good at his job just leaving and going to live in a tiny cottage away from anybody and all civilization was just strange. It was just strange. I know grief does odd things and that if we don't have strange premises then we can't set up strange books, but at the same time I know that grief does strange things to us, but that was just a little bit too strange. I didn't believe it from the first page and unfortunately that set up for a whole book of I did not believe it. Secondly, I just find it far too convenient that him having taken off to this tiny little cottage in the middle of nowhere, that he's able to be found by this woman, that she has somehow managed to track him down to this one very specific off the grid place. It was just all too coincidental. Then I don't know, I just how many more books are we gonna have to read by straight white men that set up the protagonist to save a beautiful stranger? A beautiful female stranger, of course, because otherwise what would be the point? And I have some of the same problems that I have with this plot that I had with The Silent Patient, which is just the sheer efficacy of taking on a case wherein that person does not understand that you have a secondary agenda. And yes, okay, I understand. There's the tenuous link to his daughter and the idea that maybe this person with a severe mental illness knows something about his missing daughter. And I understand that we're meant to believe that there's a certain level of desperation in that, but I just couldn't do it. I just never believed that he was actually desperate. The writing in this book is not good enough to make you feel the emotions, and so he just came across as predatory. And then without spoiling any of the plot, where it goes is just like, really? This book is so very jumbled. It's told in tiny little vignette chapters and it just feels like he's skipping from one point to another really, really rapidly. And without spoiling it, by the end you're meant to believe that there's a reason for that because you get the big reveal. But this is yet another one which doesn't actually give you any of the pieces of the puzzle. And so the reveal at the end is not something that you could have worked out. It's just like, ta-da! This was what was really going on the whole time. So this was a big fail for me, and I don't think it bodes well for that little stack of books that I took off of my shelves and thought, I'm gonna try you and see. Because I tried it and I saw. Let's talk about another top now, a completely unexpected top. When I signed up for Scribd, I discovered that not only did they have audiobooks, which was the thing that I thought that Scribd did, but also that it has ebooks and it has graphic novels. Graphic novels that I have been wanting to try for such a long time. Things like Lumberjanes and Fence. I was recommended a detective series that I had never heard of before, and so I picked up volume 1 of Goldie, Vance. This one is kind of like if Grease and Veronica Mars existed in the same world. The settings and the fashions and the slang very much come from Grease, but the entire plot feels very Veronica Mars. This one follows 16-year-old Goldie. She lives in a hotel that her father manages. It is a big Florida resort, mainly for wealthy white people, and pretty much all of her friends there are black staff members, from the bellhops to the reception desk. Goldie herself is a valet for cars, but that is not really where Goldie's strengths lie. In this Florida resort, they have an in-house detective, and he is not very good at his job, but Goldie is so very, very good at being a detective. She loves a mystery, and so she helps out the in-house detective whenever she possibly can, mostly with things that have gone missing, with break-ins that have happened, and with other seedy stuff that could happen in the hotel. One day a guest with a very prominent European accent comes into the detective's office and says that something has been taken from his room, and Goldie decides that she is going to get on the case. But the case is not as simple as that, because she discovers that really a robbery didn't take place. In fact, there is an extremely complex setup going on here that she has just walked very noisily in the middle of. I don't know how to explain to you the number of things that made me smile in this graphic novel. I read the whole first volume of it at like 2 o'clock in the morning because I could not put it down. I may or may not have woken up lovely wife Helen a few times cackling. Soz about that, darling. The plot is so clever and Goldie is so funny, but one of the things that I love most about it is her complete devotion to her friends. And amongst this, Goldie is desperately trying to set up her friend on the reception desk with one of her other friends who works in the hotel. And it's all going a little bit badly, but she's so invested in this guy being given a chance because he's kind of a bad boy and he doesn't always say the right things, but he's really, really trying. And the lengths she goes to help him are just... And then in the middle of this whole plot, Goldie gets a night off and she goes to hang out with some of her friends, and we come across a girl who works in a record shop, and we watch Goldie gaze in the window and wish that she was cool enough to talk to this girl. And it came out of nowhere. I did not see the queer happening, and then when it was there I was like yes. Throughout the story, these two are thrown together and are forced into the action together, and oh, the tension, the tension. It was just so good. If you're looking for a new graphic novel series and you like mysteries or thrillers and anything with a kind of hammy greased feel, then absolutely read this series. And finally, for the first time in 2021, it is time for me to unhaul an unread book from my TBR because I didn't want to read it. If you're new here, Stack It is a little TBR game that I have been playing with myself for the last 2 years to help me get through the books on my physical TBR. Every month, all of the physical books that come off of my TBR get put in a stack in whatever order they come off the shelves. For 2021, that means that all of these books are being put in the order of how they're being pulled for the prompts in my year of readathons. Then the whole idea of Stack It is that you read from the top of that stack to the bottom of that stack without skipping or rearranging the order of those books. I created this because what I was discovering was that every month I would make a TBR and I would end up leaving a couple of books off of it because I wasn't really in the mood to read them, but that book would never ever make its way back onto a future TBR. It was like my brain had decided if I didn't want to read it now, I probably didn't ever want to read it. So in February, I came to the bottom of my stack, and the book that was the very last pick was Dragonfish by Vu Tran, and I did not want to read it. I aggressively did not want to read it. I made myself start it a couple of times. I got all the way to page 30, but I just didn't care. This is about Robert, who is a cop in Las Vegas, and he is struggling to let go of his ex-wife Susie. He misses her, he loves her a whole lot. It wasn't his idea to get a divorce and he's trying to put his life back together. But then one day Susie's new husband comes to him and tells him that Susie has disappeared, and he starts looking into her disappearance only to receive ransom demands. And I think that was the problem for me. I think this one was leaning too far away from thriller and too much into crime and like traditional investigation. I'm not usually very interested in things in books that's like uncovering gambling dens or like secret organizations of systematic fraud going on in the background. Like stuff like that's just not really my jam. The only thing that I'm a little bit sad about with this one is that I really loved the writing. I was really interested in the way that Robert described his marriage with Susie and like the slow disintegration of it, which is what we get in the first 30 pages or so. I was quite interested in that, but I kept in the back of my mind realising that I knew where the plot was going and I just didn't want it. So as per the rules of Stack It, this one is now off of my TBR and on to my unhaul pile. It's less of an unhaul pile and more of an unhaul library at this point, but who's counting? Oh wait, I am. I'm counting. So that's it guys, those are all of my tops and bottoms for February. February was a very vindictive month. I feel there were too few days and I did not get to read nearly as much as I wanted to, which wasn't helped by the fact that I was in a book slump for the first 2 weeks of it thanks to the books from the challenge. Isn't it strange how 3 bad books can derail your entire month? So as always guys, please let me know, have you read any of the books from my tops and bottoms this month? Did I trash any of your favourites? I'm very sorry if I did, but tell me about it in the comments because I like opinions. Did you love any of the books that I loved? Please gush about them down below. I would love to hear it. And of course, if you have any recommendations whatsoever based on either Starfell or Goldie Vance, I want to hear them because I am obsessed. If you liked this video, please consider whacking the thumbs up button to thumbs me up into people's sidebars so that more people can find my face in their feed. And if you would like to keep my face in your feed, please consider hitting the subscribe button. And I will speak to all of you guys again very soon. Goodbye! Do you ever get the feeling that people don't like you?